Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about the topic that is attitude. So let's get started. Now, what do you mean by attitude? It's a way of thinking people have on something, and that something is called an attitude object. It can be a person, place, thing, ideology, or an event. For example, some people hate men with long hair. The attitude object here is men with long hair. So we can look at the difference between attitude and values. So what do you mean by attitude? As I already say, it's a way of thinking that people have on something. It describes us what you like or dislike. Whereas value says that what is important for you, okay, which you are giving priority. Let us take example. I like honest people. It is giving my attitude towards a particular kind of people. So here I give priority to what importance to honesty. So honesty is my value, and out of that priority I like honest people. Hence we can say that values are subset of attitudes, and out of value attitudes are formed. So we can say that attitudes are superset of values. Got it? Now we will be moving to the these things, that is content, structure, and functions of attitudes. So let's delve deep into the matter. Now one is called content. Content of attitude. There are two contents primarily. One is explicit and second is implicit. So what do you mean by explicit attitude? Attitudes which are developed consciously, that is called what? Explicit attitude. Attitudes which are developed consciously is called a explicit attitude, and attitudes which are developed subconsciously are called implicit attitudes. So these are content of attitudes. Now we will going to check the structure of attitude. In the structure of attitude we are going to discuss about components of attitude, its dimensions. We have strength, accessibility, ambivalence. Lastly we will going to discuss one dimensional view versus two dimensional view. So let's get started with the structure of attitude. So before going to start about the structure, we need to understand how our attitudes form. So we can take the example of Honda car. So while you are going to buy a Honda car, three components of attitude comes into picture. One is cognitive, second is affective, third is behavioral. Cognitive component means that you will choose something based on logic or knowledge. Logic, knowledge or reason. Okay, that is called cognitive component. For example, is that a person likes this Honda car, because it gives more mileage on petrol. So that is a logic reasoning. So out of this, what happens is that you will develop what? A positive attitude towards this car. Then second component is affective component. It is based on what? Some sort of emotions. You would have emotions. For example, is that you would prefer this Honda car because your wife loves it, or you would prefer this car because your parents have traveled this car a lot. So, like that emotional basis, what happens is that your attitude is developed. Next is behavioral component. Behavioral component is based on past experience. In the past experience, you would have a good experience with this car. That's why you are selecting this type of car. So out from these components, the our attitude is being formed. One is cognitive, that is logic; affective, that is by our emotions; behavioral, by our past experience, and so on. Okay, I hope that you understood the components of attitude. Now we are going to next structure, that is dimensions of attitude. Dimensions of attitude, we are going to discuss the first dimension, that is strength of the attitude. So strength of the attitude we are going to discuss. So while discussing strength of attitude, we must look this picture. This is called Rajinikanth. So there are two fans for Rajinikanth. One is in Tamil Nadu. His name is Muthu, and another is Ragesh. He is from Uttar Pradesh, UP. Okay, and Muthu is a die-hard fan of Rajinikanth, and Ragesh is also a fan, but he is not a die-hard fan. So, in this, whom you will think that is very intolerant to negative comments towards Rajinikanth, it will be Muthu. Because why? His strength of attitude towards Rajinikanth is much more than that of Ragesh. So, he will, what happens is that he will be intolerant towards negative comments against Rajinikanth. Secondly, he would worship, hero worshipping will be taken by Muthu towards Rajinikanth. Wait a minute. This is about strength of attitude, which is first dimension. Now, accessibility of attitude, what it means that how easily an attitude comes into our mind. It is called what? Accessibility of attitude. For example, is that in a very conservative society, there are many restrictions for women, isn't it? So that will be the attitude of people. That is, women should not. What happens is that be much involved in public life. Their suitable place is inside the home, rearing the children, etc. But in a liberal society, what happens is that such notions, such attitudes won't exist. So the accessibility of an attitude means what is which attitude comes into the mind. Highly accessible attitude tends to be stronger. Okay, that is called accessibility of attitude. Then we are going to study about attitude ambivalence. Attitude ambivalence is the ratio of positive and negative attitude that a person possesses. Okay, now when it will become ambivalent. Ambivalent means what happens is that very spellbounded or confused state. When it becomes ambivalent, when because the proportion of positive and negative attitude will become more and more equal. So when the proportion or ratio of positive and negative attitude become more or less equal, we can't take a resolute decision what to do. So that is called a attitude ambivalence. So these are three dimensions of attitude: strength of attitude, accessibility of attitude, attitude ambivalence. Now we are moving to one dimensional view of attitude versus two dimensional view of attitude. Now, in the one dimensional view of attitude, we have negative and positive side placed at opposite ends. This means that a particular thing can either be negative or positive. A particular thing can either be negative or positive. It can't be both. This is called one dimensional view of attitude. It is very simplified. But while we are going to two dimensional view of attitude, a particular thing can be both negative and both positive. Okay. So according to the two-dimensional view of attitude, a particular thing can be both negative and positive at the very same time. Okay. So with this, we are ending the structure of attitude. Now we are entering into the functions of attitude. So attitude has mainly five functions. One is knowledge function. Second is ego-defensive function. Third is ego-expressive function. Fourth is instrumental function. Fifth is social acceptance function. So let's look one functions into each functions one by one. Knowledge functions. Attitude gives us knowledge about a person. It gives us knowledge about a person and helps to predict our behavior. For example, if I see a God fearing people, I can predict his behavior that he would respect every religious symbols associated with him and he will be very punctual in the rituals and all. So it gives a knowledge about the person. Okay, so that is what knowledge function is about. Now, next is ego defensive function. Now, what do you mean by ego defensive function? Every person can't do everything. Can't do everything. Not every person can do everything. So, this attitude, what happens is that hides truth from you to protect your ego. I will tell you an example that you may not be able to play football like Lionel Messi. So what your mind will think that you don't like football and you are only interested in intellectual activity. By doing so, what happens is that it pushes your self esteem. It pushes your self esteem and will prevent you from going into depression. So this is what ego defensive function look. It marks the truth and it increases your self-esteem by preventing you to go into depression. Now, next is and prevents you to go to depression. Next is ego expressive function. Ego expressive function is that it attitude helps us to express who we are and what our basic values are. For example, is that I can express who I am through my attitude. If I am conservative, I can express it in that way, attitude, in my way of thinking. If I am liberal, I can express it in that way. So this expression can be what verbal and non-verbal too. Non-verbal in the sense that if I am very conservative in the nature, I can show it in my dress attire or in my way of speaking, in my way of actions, etc. Or I can simply convey it also. Okay, so that is called the ego expressive function. Next is instrumental function. Instrumental function is that we develop positive attitudes which are rewarding and negative attitudes which are punishing. Okay, we develop a positive attitude towards what is rewarding us and a negative attitude towards what is being punished. Okay, that is called a instrumental functions. Okay, next is social acceptance function. What do you mean by social acceptance functions? We will develop attitudes which is which has approval of society. That is called social acceptance functions. For example, is that we are lighting the our house during the occasion of Diwali because it is the norm of the society. So we will develop positive attitude which is accepted by the society. It is called what? Social acceptance function. So these are the functions of the attitude. Now we will look the relation between the attitude and the behavior. So before going into it, we can check a simplified version of attitude and behavior. So it is a pyramidal structure. Wait a minute. Pyramidal structure. In the pyramidal section, we can see that the beliefs is in bottom and behavior is placed at the topmost. So a person will have A, B, C beliefs. Out of this, he would consider B as an important belief. So we have discussed that what do you mean by values? Values are something which you give priority or importance. So let this value be honesty. Now, this is your value, honesty. Now, out of this value, what happens is that you would like honest people. You would like honest people. Now, if you like honest people, what happens is that it will reflect on your behavior. How you will be what? Supportive to these honest people. Okay. You would support these honest people as you can. So, this is how beliefs, values, attitude, behaviors are correlated with each other. Now, we will be looking four cases to look into the relation between attitude and behavior. Case 1. When attitude does not have much impact on the behavior. So, some of you may, what happens is that have political affiliation or candidate affiliations, but you would not be interested to go to vote. So this is a simple situation when attitude does not have a impact on behavior. Another famous experiment is that this is called US China experiment on attitude behavior relation. So it is being conducted by Richard Lapierre, an American psychologist. So this experiment is conducted in the context that during that time in the US there was a hard negative attitude towards Chinese people. So what this sociologist is that he asked the Chinese couple to travel across the United States and stay in different hotels. So they did so. They were permitted in many hotels to stay but refused in few. After this, uh, Richard Napier asked questions to the various hotels in which the Chinese had stayed. They still had the negative attitude towards Chinese. It was shocking because they allowed Chinese to stay in the hotel, but still they had negative attitude towards Chinese. But this attitude didn't reflected in that their behavior. This is the famous experiment, uh, which is called attitude and behavior, where attitude has less impact on the behavior. Now we are coming to the case two, that is behavior, that is negative behavior tends to coexist with a positive attitude. That is negative behavior is existing, but you also have a positive attitude. How it is being possible? For example, you are smoking, but you know that smoking is injurious to health. Okay, so why it happens? Because you doesn't have your positive attitude is not strong enough to influence your behavior. This is the reason why behavior is not being changed. Next is when attitude and behavior is consistent. There is a consistency between attitude and behavior. So this happens when our attitude is strong and person is aware of his or her attitude, and we have little pressure on the person, and we are free to develop our attitude. There is no peer pressure and something else. Then fourth, we are not being watched or evaluated by others. Lastly, our attitude and our behavior would have a positive consequences, so that we will have a consistency between attitude and behavior. So these are the criteria which helps us to maintain consistency between attitude and behavior. And very notable fact is that people with a high integrity shows a direct relation between attitude and behavior. Integrity, a person with integrity is that he is showing consistency in his values. That is, if he is honest throughout his life, and he is honest throughout every circumstances. Okay. Now, the last place. Okay. When our behavior influence the attitude, when our behavior influence the attitude, and it is reflected with the cognitive dissonance. Now cognitive dissonance means that a persons will have conflicting thoughts or beliefs. Okay, person will have conflicting thoughts or beliefs, or a person will have conflicting actions and beliefs. Okay, for example is that, as I mentioned before, if a person uh, drinks alcohol, he knows that alcohol is not good for health. Or if a person commits extramarital relationship, he knows that extramarital relationship is not good. So there is a conflict with his thoughts and actions. It is called what? Cognitive dissonance. So as a human being, this human being doesn't like this cognitive dissonance, this conflicts. So they will try to reduce it. While in the above case, they will do one thing, that they might abandon the action of extramarital relation, and they go with their attitude that extramarital relation is not good, or they will forego that attitude that extramarital relationship is not good, and say that it is okay to go with extramarital relationship. So the human beings will try to reduce their conflicts between actions and attitude. That is, they will go with the actions and justify it. That is called how attitude will manipulate the, sorry, how behavior will manipulate the attitude. That is, if I am drinking alcohol, I will say that my behavior is being justified, and the attitude of alcoholic consumption is dangerous to our health will be nullified by me, by my behavior. It is called what? How behavior will influence the attitude. I think that you got the point. Now, next thing is how you can change one's attitude or your attitude. So there are many theories for this. First theory is learning theory of attitude change. So in this learning theory of attitude change, we have three learnings. One is classical learnings. In this classical learnings, we develop a positive reaction towards an object, person, or event. And by developing a positive emotion, we can develop a positive behavior also. Okay. Now, second is operant conditioning. In operant conditioning, we strengthen the desirable attitude and weaken the undesirable attitude because we human beings are not perfect. We would have some undesirable attitudes also. So we are weakening it and strengthening the desirable attitudes. Third is the observational learning. In the observational learning, we observe behavior of others and change our attitude. For example, is that some of our family members might clean the floors or and go to kitchen and cook the food. So by seeing this, we would also develop an attitude to clean our floors and go to kitchen and help others also. So it is called observational learning. So these are three learnings which is being envisioned in learning theory of attitude change. I hope that you understood it. Now, next theory of attitude change is elaborate likelihood theory of attitude change, or you can say that the theory of persuasion. Okay, theory of persuasion. So what do you mean by persuasion? Persuasion is an attempt to change people's attitude. Okay, persuasion is a attempt to change people's attitude in way of communication. We will discuss about it in detail in the last section. Okay, now we will be doing with the persuasion in two ways. First, a person gives a powerful message to audience or to people, and by this message there can be an attitude change. How? Because the people would examine the message, and by looking into its logic, they can change it permanently. Okay, for example, is that if I am speaking about, if I am giving a message about dowry and what are its merits and evils, etc., it could apply to people's logic. As a result, what happens is that they may change the people's attitude also. But if it doesn't contain logic and to some extent it appeals to the emotion, it can bring some temporary change. Okay, if it is not containing that much logic, but it contains some sort of emotion in it, it could bring only temporary change. Whereas if it contains both logic and emotion, it is thought provoking and it is logical, it can bring a permanent change in our attitude. This is called what? Persuasion theory. Okay. Next is dissonance theory of attitude change. In the dissonance theory of attitude change, it is correlated with the what? Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, that is conflict in our behavior and attitude. That is called a cognitive dissonance. So when this conflict arises, we may either neutralize our attitude or behavior in order to reduce the conflict. Okay. So with this, we are ending how we can change an attitude based on these theories: learning theory of attitude change, theory of persuasion, dissonance theory of attitude change. Now we are going to look into moral and political attitude. Moral attitude is the attitude you hold towards moral issues, where society debates what is wrong and what is right. For example, is that your position on euthanasia, that is mercy killing, it is whether it is right or wrong. Political attitude means what? It's the attitude you hold towards a political issue. That is, what is your view on reservation. So you look at the political spectrum here. So this moderate is called center, and this is called right. This is called left. So left-wing political ideology proposes changes, whereas right-wing political ideology proposes no changes. It is status quo. And within the left also there is variation because liberal will propose a moderate changes, whereas radical proposes 100% changes. And in this right also we can have variation, that is the centrist right will have what? Moderate changes, and the ultra right will have what? No changes at all. And in the Indian context, we have the central political idea attributed to Gandhiji, left to Nehru, centrist left to Nehru, centrist right to Sardar Patel, etc. So I am not going to discuss much about the political spectrum, but giving you a rough idea about the political spectrum. Okay, I hope that you are clear with the moral and political attitude also. So we are going to last part, that is social influence and persuasion. So what do you mean by social influence? Social influence is a way by which our attitudes, our behavior are influenced. Look at this act. Look at this ad. We may have seen this ad. So this is advocating to build toilets for brides. So this would have some sort of influence because many actors and celebrities are being advertised in it. So it is trying to bring some sort of attitude change in the mindset of people. Because why it is so important? Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was very successful, not only launching in the sanitation facilities like toilets, etc. It is also successful in bringing change in the attitude of people. Change in the attitude of people. Now, what was the change in this attitude? So, the people had a notion that the toilets were a bad omen and it should not be placed inside the home. So, such attitude has been rectified through this act by the campaign of Swachh Bharat Mission. Okay, so this is one of the important that we need to change the people's attitude in order to have a positive behavior towards a project, and this is being done through social influencing. Okay. Now there are three ways of social influencing. That is, one is conformity. That is, conformity means what? That is, it is called peer pressure. That is, other people are doing it. So you also will be compelled to do the same. It's called conformity. Compliance means it is a explicit request. That is, some people are making a request to you that, for example, you go and vote during the election. It is not a kind of an order or something, but you will comply it because it is a good thing. Okay, so this is called a compliance. Obedience means what? It is an order. There is a pressure. There is a mandatory pressure from the side. That is, you need to wear helmet. You need to wear seat belt while you are in a vehicle. So it is a kind of an obedience. You are obeying to the order. So by these three ways, you can influence the society. Now, lastly, we are going to social persuasion. Social persuasion is an active attempt to change a person's attitude, beliefs, or feeling by form of communication. So, Swachh Bharat missions, Abhiyans, campaigns like Darwaza Bandh also is giving a hint for social persuasions also. And there will be two types of social persuasion. One is systematic persuasion, by which you are appealing towards people's logic and reason, and another is heuristic persuasion. You are appealing to people's habit or emotions. There are two types of persuasion. One is systemic persuasion, where you are appealing towards people's logic and reason, and another is heuristic persuasion, where you are appealing towards their emotions. I hope that you had a clear idea of attitudes and its related term.